YouTube Ozik going the Goat House is back. Derek Carr benched by the Raiders. Only 2 games left, but many out there believe that he could be traded this offseason. So I'm here in this video to break down the landing spots for Derek Carr. I ranked them, actually. We'll talk about the value a little bit as well for him, what it could look like. We'll talk about what's next for the Raiders, but we'll start by going over some key information about Derek Carr, the Raiders, the contract, things like that. So I'm excited to break it down here, kind of an offseason type video. Some other ones on the channel, more to come in the offseason. Playoff content right around the corner. Can't wait for that. Follow us on Twitter. Already we're talking about a lot of this stuff on our Twitter, so you're missing out if you're not following that. It's on your screen. Link pinned in the comments or that. And our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV, code GOAT. Again, links down below. So some important, key information here on Derek Carr. He does have 3 years remaining on his deal, so a little pricey, but we'll talk about that. But it's good to have a quarterback under contract if you're interested in acquiring him. He signed that extension in April of this year, 2022, and added those 3 years on to that current year, which was this year. Comes with a $33 million cap hit in 2023 if traded for. So if a team goes out and trades for Derek Carr, $33 million cap hit is what it would look like. They could, of course, get him and then restructure his deal to clear some space if they wanted to. Again, restructure is not a pay cut. Don't expect Derek Carr to take a pay cut, but you can restructure and push money back. But that's for a different time if we want to discuss that. But $33 million right now is what he's scheduled his cap hit to be for this year if a team trades for him. Cap hits if a team acquires him. We talked about $33 million in 2023, $42 million in 2024, $41.3 million in 2025. So those are the 3 remaining years. Gets pretty expensive. Worth it if he goes back to playing like a top 10 quarterback around that range and not play too well this year. Was it the new, McDaniels, the new scheme system? Will there be teams confident with him kind of going back to where he was playing and they're fine with paying that? Maybe. A lot of teams desperate for quarterbacks, and you have a decent one here in Derek Carr. If we talked about if a team trades for Derek Carr, it comes with a $33 million cap hit. But if the Raiders trade Derek Carr, they will clear somewhat close to that, but $29.25 million. So interesting. Why do I say that is interesting? It's because usually with the big-time quarterbacks or quarterbacks with big-time contracts, it's kind of rare this is actually first year of the extension. He had 1 more year left on his deal before the extension. That was this year that's going on right now. So this is the second year if you want. It's the first year on the extension, though. Usually, when you look at the Russ contract, you look at all the other quarterbacks' contract. Aaron Rodgers got a new one. Most of the time, the team loses money, actually loses cap space by trading that player, just because how big the contract is, how they lay it out. Usually, that's the way it ends up being. But in this case, the Raiders clear $29.25 million by trading him in the first year on that extension. And again, that's interesting because not only because it's rare, but it really, the way the Raiders structured that deal, it was really like they knew they may trade him. That's kind of what it feels like. And so it was smart by the Raiders. It was kind of smart the way they structured that contract, but it was almost like they knew going out into the year. And maybe Carr and his agent, by the way that contract was laid out, maybe they knew as well that, hey, if you play great, of course, we're going to keep you. If you don't, we're probably going to trade you because the way we structure this contract, we're not afraid to do it. Like, we may trade you. Maybe they already had plans for somebody else, another quarterback to come in and trade him. Somebody asked me on Twitter, why would they extend him in the first place? It's a pretty good question there. But again, have him extended because he was due for a deal too. Do you want a quarterback playing on a 1 year deal? Was he? We don't really know behind the scenes. How bad did he want a deal like at that second, this offseason? But extend him, and if he plays good, you got a quarterback under contract while the cap space is about to rise and the market for quarterbacks, the price for quarterbacks is about to rise. So let's get it out of the way now. Hey, if he plays good, we have him under contract for quite a few years. If he doesn't, we made it very tradable. Teams are always desperate for quarterbacks. There's definitely coaches or teams out there that believe he's better than what he showcased this year. They will trade for him. They will trade for him. So, and we have this contract very tradable. So that is why they went and slapped that extension on him. So it's a pretty tradable contract. So that's the good thing about the Raiders here. And the bad thing is, you see the thing at the bottom, Carr has a no trade clause. So we remember that from some other quarterbacks too. Obviously, big time quarterbacks. Watson, guys that basically can pick where they go. What it means is basically Carr has to agree to the trade. So if they go and they agree on a trade with a team that doesn't look too great and Carr doesn't think he fits or anything like that, he can say no. He can narrow his list down. Basically, it's almost like he's a free agent in a way. And why that's not good for the Raiders is it could decrease his value because they can lose leverage. I don't think he's only going to pick one team, though. I don't think he's going to be like, yes, I'm only going to this team, only trade me there. If that was the case, they would lose all leverage, and that team would gain leverage, and they'd be like, all right, he's only coming to us. It's either cut him or trade him to us. We'll give you a mid-round pick, and then the Raiders are pretty much, I guess we got to do it. I don't think that will happen. I think there'll be multiple teams where Derek Carr will play for or will not. Also multiple teams that probably will not. But it's going to be good to have multiple teams that it will play for. If it gets narrowed down to one or two, you're losing big-time leverage. So that's interesting. So that's kind of the negative there. The way they structured the contract and how it's tradable, that was good. And if the Raiders do end up keeping Carr, you see right there, $34.875 million would be the cap hit this upcoming year. So just something to know there, obviously. So let's talk about what would be next for the Raiders. What is next? Something interesting about all this, if they are serious about moving on from him, is it really feels like the Raiders are choosing McDaniels over Derek Carr. Because McDaniels hasn't proven anything as a head coach, only negative things as a head coach. Really good as an offense coordinator track record. That was with years with Belichick, Brady. You get it, And we thought maybe he could be fired after this year because the Raiders were one of the more disappointing teams in football. Their second half coaching adjustments, play, not good. Those are things worth firing a coach over sometimes. Not saying it for sure needs to happen or that's the only issue, anything like that. And then Derek Carr, who's been a big piece of the Raiders franchise, has looked like a top 10 quarterback in the past. In 1 year he doesn't. They're going to go McDaniels over Carr. So that's what it's looking like right now. You kind of can question that. And that kind of brings us to who are the Raiders' options for next year? How would I rank the options maybe most likely at this time, like kind of thinking at this time that they are going to trade Carr? That's what it sounds like. I know Jeremy Fowler was reporting on that aspect, that part of it the most. Someone I trust for sure. And it does really feel like it. It feels like they're choosing McDaniels over Carr. So if you're choosing McDaniels over Carr, who is McDaniels going to go with? Like he's running the show then, it sounds like. Who are they going to go with? And they have Ziegler in the front office, who's a Patriots guy as well. Tom Brady is going to be a free agent, not under contract with the Bucs next year. He could retire. He came out of retirement last year, so some people think he's got to retire now, right? Because he kind of almost did it last year. He was a little off this year. It was kind of a rough go. We've heard in the past the Raiders can make a serious run at Tom Brady. Now it's making a little more sense. He has that connection with McDaniels, obviously, the Patriots background. The Raiders have Devontae Adams, weapon there. We'll see if they get Josh Jacobs back, but they have weapons on this team. They obviously like their coaching staff. I like Patrick Graham. It's kind of off topic, but I like him as a defensive coach there, coordinator. So I think Tom Brady's the number one option right now. I think it could be an appealing spot for him. It didn't work out in Tampa Bay. He definitely can go back to Tampa Bay. He definitely can go to some other spots. The 49ers have been thrown out there, obviously. I think the Dolphins, the Jets, the teams like that have been thrown out there, but that's actually what makes the most sense right now. And number two, I put Lamar Jackson. I did put very unlikely. Kind of got to go over multiple parts here. Lamar Jackson, you may say, why is he under Tom Brady? Lamar Jackson's got to be the best free agent. He's young, still getting better. Why isn't he option one over Brady? I just think the Raiders in their head, might be more, McDaniels might be more focused on Tom Brady. I think it's more likely for them and who they're more focused on, believe it or not. But Lamar Jackson could fit that scheme. Definitely can fit that McDaniel scheme there for sure. I can see that as a fit. I think he'd be good there. But maybe want more of a passer, perhaps McDaniels, like Brady, definitely could see that. I did put very unlikely, though, because there are people out there that I think they're more fingers crossed the way they're speaking in existence that Lamar Jackson's going to go somewhere else. I think it's unlikely. I think him and the Ravens are going to try to work out a deal. If they can't, they'll slap the franchise tag on him, not let him get elsewhere. But maybe they're just like, hey, we can find someone else. Lamar's got beat up the last couple years, missed some games. Maybe I don't see them saying that and doing that, but maybe. So I felt like I have to list Lamar Jackson here because I do think the Raiders would have some interest. If Brady was off the table and it's like, all right, Lamar actually might be available, we might be able to get him, they will have some interest. Number 3, I think the option could be draft or possibly trade up. They have a pretty early pick. Maybe they're seeing that right now. And there's 3 pretty solid quarterbacks in the draft that should go top 10. And they're like, hey, we're looking pretty good right now. Let's bench Carr. He didn't work out with us. And then, hey, if we absolutely fall in love with one specific guy, we can trade up a few spots and get that guy perhaps. Because again, they're looking like they're in a pretty good spot with the draft. And then I'd put Derek. 3, 4, 5 are all pretty close. I'd put Derek because 3 is tough. Would they rather go with the young guy that's got to learn over Derek Carr? So that's where I had a hard time with that because the Raiders are trying to win right now. That's kind of the philosophy, the mentality over there. Even though they're not winning right now this year. So that's the tough part. But then again, it feels pretty clear that they don't feel Carr's a fit. It didn't look like it, on the field this year. So they maybe just rather go with somebody they could draft. Jimmy Garoppolo's another option. Was on the Patriots. McDaniels is there as well. They did get rid of him. So I think that's an option as well. Maybe more likely to end up with Carr though. Maybe they kind of view him as similar. Like maybe we'd rather go with Carr. Might as well keep him. And there is some small chance that teams just aren't interested, or they are interested in Carr, but maybe don't want to trade for him. What the Raiders are asking, we'll wait around and see if they drop their asking price, or maybe they'll cut him. Maybe they'll cut him, because they could if they end up getting somebody else and and they want to clear that space. That's possible. So teams could wait around. And then, or maybe they end up keeping him instead of cutting him then. So we don't want to cut him. We want to keep him. He's too good. Maybe they didn't get anybody else yet. So then they end up keeping him. So that's why I thought maybe that was more likely than Garoppolo. Garoppolo has some other landing spots. I think the Jets, back to the Niners, is well there. So, and then somebody might snatch him right away in free agency while the Raiders are still trying to gather some trade offers and, what his value is and, maybe how the draft is looking as they get closer. So things like that. So there's more options, of course, but those were the top 5 in my opinion. I'm just really feeling Brady to the Raiders right now, but it's kind of bold even to put that at 1 because is he going to leave the Bucs? Is he going to keep playing or retire? That's kind of the big one. And if he keeps playing, is he leaving the Bucs? If he is leaving the Bucs, is it the Raiders? Could it be the Niners? Could it be the somebody else? Anybody else there? So maybe it is a little bold to put Tom Brady, even though I think you can understand why it makes sense. Well, let's talk about a Derek Carr trade. Kind of go back to actual Derek Carr. Some you see some landing spots. I listed quite a few here, and I was talking a little bit on Twitter as well. We'll explain it more as I'm on screen talking to you guys here on camera. But first, the value is really tricky to figure out. When it first kind of the news came out, what popped probably the first thing that popped in my head, like where he could be traded to and what's the value. Did not play good this year. He's got a pricey contract. It might get to the point where it's pretty clear that the Raiders want to trade him. So maybe that drops his value as well. But so I was thinking definitely less than a first. But I sat here and really thought about, to get my final thought on it here when making this video. And I still think he's pretty damn valuable. I mean, just before McDaniels, he was looking like a top 10 quarterback. How clutch he was at the end of last season. I thought that was the best he's played, maybe pre-injury. I think maybe ever, how clutch he was, the throws he was making, getting that team in the playoffs when everyone kind of counted him out because with the coaching situation, a little bit of a disaster situation, and the Raiders never close out the season too. So to be able to do that, clutch up like that was crazy. So teams still got to view hey, that was just in the end of last year. We need a quarterback. When do quarterbacks like this become available? And maybe they'll view him as more of a fit than he was with McDaniel's offense too. So I still think the value is a late first or multiple day 2s, like a second from this year, next year, maybe a third in there, a second, a third, and maybe you throw a day 3 pick in there, maybe multiple. Could it be like the McCaffrey deal, somewhere similar where it's like multiple non-first round picks? I definitely think it can be that still. Originally when we first heard this news, when I first started making this video, I'm like, I would not have put a first there, but I really started thinking about it, and I still think there's people out there, teams, coaches, not only that are desperate for quarterback, but view Carr pretty damn highly. And then where are we going to get a guy like this? Or we're just missing a Carr to take a Carr type quarterback, take that next step. So I actually still think that's his value. So the Raiders could be in business here. The no trade clause could drop it though. It actually could drop that value. And I talked about it a little bit in the beginning of this video. If he only agrees to play for a certain team or maybe a certain team or two, the leverage could be lost for the Raiders, gain for those teams, and they'll be like, yeah, you pretty much have to trade him, to us at this point, or maybe they don't have to, but it depends on what the Raiders want to do. But so that could drop the value. So if that is the case, they won't get a first. Still could get the multiple day twos. If it's just one team, he won't. I don't see that happening though. I think it'll be multiple teams he would agree to be traded to. So the Raiders could be okay there. They could be okay. And then the top landing spots ranked. I ranked the Commanders first. It was pretty clear they're on the hunt for a quarterback last year. They were rumored to be in on Jimmy, or it kind of came out after the fact. They liked Jimmy Garoppolo, but they were a little worried about the injury, what was going on then. They had to make a move. They made a move from Carson Wentz. Wentz will be starting this week. We'll see what he can do if he can get him in the playoffs and he can win the playoffs. Is that a good thing if he looks great? And they're like, hey, I guess we got to go with Wentz next year. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I still think they're searching for that quarterback. They want to get better there. Carr is definitely even where he sits, how he played this year, a much, much better option than guys like Wentz, Heineke, obviously. So the Commanders who are still searching, and I made a video not too long ago, landing spots for free agent quarterbacks. And the Commanders, weren't, and I would rank them top 3. Commanders were in the video, but I never really found a number 1 spot for them besides Heineke. Maybe he's the most likely to end up back there, but as a backup, they're always like option 2 or 3. So I'm like, somebody's going to go to the Commanders. Who's it going to be? And now Carr might be available. It made a lot of sense to me. And that's a pretty good team over there. They could use some more help on the offensive line, but they got the running backs. Their receivers played well this year, really caught the ball well. We know the defense can play. So that feels like a solid option. The Jets make a lot of sense. The Jets, I feel like Garoppolo or Carr for the Jets, or maybe bring back Mike White. Tom Brady to me is a small, tiny percentage because I do think it'd be a pretty good fit over there. But I'm looking at Garoppolo or Carr for them. I think maybe Garoppolo's a little more likely. I think it's a little more likely there, but I think it's pretty possible. Good fit. They would be a pretty good team. The team's heading north, right? They're looking better and better, and they're going to continue to look better and better. I guess depending on the quarterback, but with Carr, yes. So the Jets made some sense to me. For the Commanders, it's like, yeah, I think everything works there. For them, they're going to clear space. If they cut Wentz, they'll have a lot of space. Jets will find ways to, if they need to do this to clear a little bit more space. Probably rather go Jimmy Garoppolo a little cheaper. Seahawks make a ton of sense to me. I almost wanted to put the Seahawks 1 or 2 because I would love the fit with Derek Carr and the Seahawks with those receivers, Pete Carroll. I think they made Russell Wilson look better than he is, and they made Geno Smith look better than he is. So something with that offense, and Derek Carr, they'd probably get the most out of him. The top 10 quarterback that we saw before this year, maybe more. So that would make so much sense. For that reason, I want to put the Seahawks number 1. They have draft picks to be able to trade. But multiple things here. It sounded like they were very, very interested in extending Geno Smith. Now, that can change, and just like that, blink of an eye, that could change. But it sounded like it almost sounded like they were already discussing it, last I heard. So, and with Geno Smith there. But now Geno Smith's not playing as well recently. The Seahawks are kind of going downhill at this portion of the season here late in the year. So we got to see what happens, if they can make a push for the playoffs or not. But there are reasons that make me want to put the Seahawks at 1 or 2. I just think that just like in a blink of an eye, they can extend Geno like we've been hearing they're going to do, and then bam, they're off the list completely. So maybe a little bold putting them at 1 or 2, but that's probably my favorite fit. Honestly, that's probably my favorite fit. And I could see the Seahawks choosing Carr over Geno, just changing their mind just like that. So if it was kind of a favorite fit list, I believe I'd put the Seahawks at 1. I put the Panthers at 4. At first, I'm like, are they really going to trade for another quarterback, go to veteran quarterback? Probably not. I'm like, yeah, they might. They don't have as high of a pick anymore. They still kind of got, even though they're battling for a division winner, to win the division. They still have a pretty good pick because, well, if they keep winning the division, that'll change a little bit. But they still have a pretty decent pick. But as of right now. So that that means they're not really in position to draft that quarterback of the future. Do they want to mess around with another project? Maybe they won't view Carr as a project because he's kind of proven. He had a bad year this year, but he's kind of proven in a way. Like, he's a decent quarterback, at least a decent quarterback. And the Panthers show they can win with the right coach in there. Steve Wilkes doing a heck of a job. They got a good defense out there. They got young playmakers all over that defense. They got a running game, that's for sure. And they have weapons at the receiver position led by DJ Moore. And the offensive line is getting a lot better because they've added some young talent to that offensive line, and they did an incredible job with that. So it's actually more of an appealing spot than you think. And it actually, even though you may think that they might be done with those trades, maybe not. Maybe they'd rather go get the sure thing guy when they finally have an opportunity. So I put the Panthers up there, and they did acquire some picks in the McCaffrey trade. I like the top four the most. But I put the Giants at 5 because they have a ton of cap space, and this would be an upgrade over Daniel Jones. And the Giants were a sneaky good team this year, and just upgrading that much at quarterback. I know Daniel Jones looked pretty good, and he's getting better. He might have looked better than Derek Carr this year, but Derek Carr is just better. And improving at the quarterback position like that, and they're probably going to be in the playoffs too this year. That should boost them a little bit more, under Brian Daboll. So that would be fantastic. The downside is, I think in that offense, we see it with Daniel Jones, maybe a little bit more of a mobile quarterback. Daniel Jones he's pretty mobile, but he's not like he doesn't really have that label of a mobile quarterback, so he doesn't need to be like a Lamar Jackson or anything like that. But they may be looking for a guy that can use his legs a bit, can brush off some sacks, and escape, throw on the, Carr can do that from time to time. But so that would be the downside. Another downside is although they do have a ton of cap space, if they throw Carr in there with, they need receiver help. But those receivers, is he going to be as good as he was in the past? Do they need to fix some other things first? Receivers, a couple other things here and there. Obviously, pretty good team, obviously too. But so that'd be a reason, maybe no. But you can argue both sides. And I put the Bucs at 6. Almost want to put the Bucs higher. But first, Brady needs to either retire or say he's not coming back to the Bucs. He could be with the Raiders. We talked about that. First, that needs to happen, and they're in a bad spot with the cap situation, so they need to clear a lot. Every team could clear; they can get back down to 0, and they actually I think they have like $95 million, the next year after that, so they can kind of use some of that money to push money back. So it's definitely possible, but things would need to happen first. And then other options, Saints, I almost wanted to put in that. Same thing with the Bucs; they got to clear some cap space first. They need a quarterback too. We actually know they need a quarterback. The Bucs, we don't know yet if Brady's situation. Saints, we actually know they need a quarterback. They got to dig themselves a hole as well. They're less future cap space in the Bucs, so it's harder to borrow future money, even though they'll figure it out. But what if Sean Payton comes back to the Saints? He's gonna need a better quarterback. Go get his Drew Brees type quarterback there. Carr isn't Brees, but some similarities maybe, like a style of quarterback. But I can definitely see that. But more things need to happen there. I think you would need, and should they be doing that? If they get Sean Payton back, maybe, because they'd be a lot better team, especially with Carr and Sean Payton. But if they, other than that, they shouldn't be going all out, because Carr, it ties you up a lot of space in the future. The Saints need to know when to kind of cut it out. Like, hey, probably should go in rebuild mode. It really depends on who's coaching that team and their situation, but they may need to do that. Colts, I see a lot of people saying he's going to end up on the Colts, and you can just see it just because they keep trading for veteran quarterbacks. This is a better option than the ones they trade for in the past. But I'm just not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it here. And the Colts finally realized we got to stop trading for guys, even though it's a better option. We have more needs than just quarterback now. Maybe a few years ago we didn't. We kind of blew it then. That was our window. We need the fixed offensive line again, get it back to where it was going. We need receivers. The defense really isn't it. It's the defense is all right. But it needs to get healthy. It's maybe not as good without Eberflus. So I think their focus is with several things. Not just Derek Carr, the quarterback. And it really depends on who the coach is. I guess if they get a certain coaching hire, if they hire a certain guy, one or two, specific guys, that could boost up the ranking. I think a lot of people would rank the Colts higher in something like this. I just don't think they could afford to do something. I think they finally realized that. Falcons are 9, definitely need a quarterback. I think this is where the no trade clause come into play. I don't know. I don't know if Derek Carr would play for the Falcons. Maybe, Kyle Pitts over there. We've seen him work well with Darren Waller in the past. Derek Carr, that is. Arthur Smith, a pretty good offensive guy. I suppose he hasn't been great recently. The receivers don't look. Drake London's there, I suppose. Offensive line was better this year. maybe. I think the Falcons are more likely to draft a guy. They have an early pick right now. Could end up getting earlier. I think Carr would probably prefer to play for other teams, and he does have that no trade clause. So that's interesting. The Titans definitely could sniff around and see if they can trade Tannehill for probably something under his value, which the value isn't super high either. If they trade him, they're also going to cut some other guys that they're going to cut, and they're going to clear a lot of space. So right now they're negative in cap space, but if they cut those guys that they're going to cut, they're going to have a decent amount of cap space. They trade Tannehill, they're going to have a good amount of cap space, believe it or not. And then they can make a deal for a guy like Carr where they get better at the quarterback position. Things need to happen, though. Things need to happen first. 49ers, they would be better. If they had Derek Carr today, they might be the Super Bowl favorite. Some maybe consider them that already. Understandable for sure. So they could see like, hey, we finally go get that quarterback. In the past, we heard Shanahan wanted a guy like Kirk Cousins. Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, not a big difference there, I suppose. But, so maybe go get that sure thing. I just think so that would make sense. I just think they're more likely, what's on the more likely list, like have Purdy and Lance battle it out, bring back Jimmy Garoppolo, bring in Tom Brady maybe. I think those are more likely, so some things got to have to be passed on for that to happen. And then just kind of dark horse wild cards there. Miami and Houston. Miami, Tua with the concussions and not playing well recently, more so the concussions maybe can lead them to needing another quarterback. I think most likely the Tua is the guy next year. We'll see. And then Houston, maybe more of a dark horse. Maybe they're putting up fights with teams recently, and they still have the first pick. But maybe they think like, hey, if we get a good quarterback in here, enough dealing with the young guys that are going to go through growing pains. We get a good quarterback. Our defense played a lot better this year. We'll just add a guy that can help stop the run, add another weapon at the receiver position. The offensive line played better this year. Hey, we might have ourselves a ball team, and I can see that. And then they're sitting there with the first pick, where I think most likely they're going to take a guy like Bryce Young or quarterback. I think that's still most likely. But they could sit here and say the things I just said, like we might be pretty good with a quarterback, add another weapon, stop the runs a bit. If they can figure out how to stop the run, that defense could be nasty. The first pick, who's worthy of the first pick? Jalen Carter, defensive tackle from Georgia, a freaky prospect, rare type of prospect that can help you in multiple ways in the interior defensive line. So do they go for Carr and then take Carter? It's a possibility. I'd say most likely not, kind of why I have him at the bottom here. But last second, I kind of thought of that. I'm like, hey, we got to talk about Houston a little bit because that's actually a possibility. Like, hey, let's go get the sure thing quarterback. Let's build around that. Let's keep building around it because I think we did, I think they did a pretty good job this past offseason. I do. Even though they're the worst team in football right now, like you can kind of feel it. Like they got the right pieces, except for quarterback in some other spots, but maybe there. So very interesting though. Very interesting debate, especially with the value. The value there is, we probably can debate that all day. At the end of the day, I still think there's teams desperate enough, and there's teams, and you don't have to be too desperate to be interested in Derek Carr. I mean, I still think a pretty good quarterback there. And there's teams that'll view him not with McDaniels. Some of those guys out there might not like McDaniels or agree with him. They might view him not on this year at all, but just what we saw at the end of the most recent Derek Carr in their minds, a decent system, and that'd be at the end of last year making that playoff push there. So, in which they succeeded in. So, very interesting stuff. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. We're always talking with you guys with this type of stuff on Twitter as well. Link pinned in the comments for that. So check it out. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications on. Full NFL coverage here, so join us. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.